Welcome to a new episode of REALPOLITIK television specials. Today we're with Guillermina Gordoa, a psychoanalyst. How are you, Guillermina?
Hello, how are you?
How are you doing?
Good, very good. She's
Also the creator of the WoW experience, an alternative to dating apps, right? So that people can meet.
Yes. Not just dating apps, but something that has to do with reliving real encounters, right? Because it's not just for, of course, people who want to meet without apps, but also for all the people who want to have more real encounters with others. So, how did this project come about? Did you already see that demand? I saw that there was, right? That there were, because there are still several things, such as a great exhaustion in relation to social networks, as well as an increase in and an increasingly massive consumption of networks. There is also a whole sector that is very exhausted, and a number of effects of dating apps in relation to an original proposal that had to do with generating an easier meeting, to an opposite effect, which is that fewer and fewer meetings are taking place, so there is more and more chatting and more virtual exchange and less real encounters and talking to people and talking to colleagues and what is heard in the office. It has been a while since I have been in the office, but if you listen, you find that the effect is happening contrary to what was sought and that there are very long virtual relationships, a lot of chatting and few face-to-face encounters, and that was generating a lot of exhaustion and a lot of frustration too. So, initially we started with this idea of saying, well, how do we generate a proposal for those people who are tired of this or who don't like it or who don't like it? Even people who feel exposed, who don't want it, who are against what many people call the human catalog. Well, it's not against apps per se. Let's say, one can have their opinion, they may or may not be useful. It has more to do with those who don't want it, what proposal there is. And, as we experimented with our proposal, we found that it didn't only have to do with putting together a proposal for those who are looking for a romantic, sexual relationship, but for people who are increasingly feeling lonelier for different reasons. For example, I moved to a new city, I broke ties with my old friends, I have my old friends, but the proposals for meeting up, I come in, go in another direction. And a third moment, which is the moment we are in now, because that's where we started, right? The romantic relationships. Then we said, well, it's not just about romantic relationships, it also has to do with loneliness. And what proposal do we have to combat this loneliness? And today we are in another moment that means, stop, it doesn't even have to do with loneliness or dating. It has to do with a different way of meeting, a different way of going out, venturing into other ways of connecting just because we feel like it. In that sense, it's very difficult to meet people outside of this framework, let's say. What you do is promote, facilitate meetings. But you were emphasizing precisely this. Well, a new way of meeting people. The idea of talking to a stranger has disappeared today, as if it's not possible unless it's in the context of a musical event, a bar, a nightclub, let's say. I suppose it must still happen in some spaces, it's not the most common, but it also depends on the age, right? One of the issues we always think about is, what happens to people over 40, 50, or 60 who want to share outside of their traditional circle? I think there is something that used to happen that doesn't happen today, and it's not by chance. I think it's produced by a system in which the other person appears more as a threat than as someone with whom one wants to welcome, share, and whose presence transforms and moves me. The constitution of the other person as a threat makes us afraid to connect, and it's not just in the intimate sphere, it also happens on the street, in stores, in everyday life, where there's a kind of tension in relationships, right? So the other person is not someone I look at, and this is obviously even more so after the pandemic. I don't see the other person as someone to care for, love, or share with. I mean, I'm speaking in general terms, of course, but rather someone I have to be careful of.
In the face of all the mistrust.
So, that's what's happened in recent years, a long time ago, right? But this idea of constructing the other as a threat, of the other as a subject capable of infecting me during the pandemic and the other as capable of attacking and hurting me, the breakdown of bonds in general and of the social fabric in general. In relation to friendships, relationships, couples. The reality is that today a space to go out is a space to go out with my people, and it's not a space to go out in general to connect. So, what one sees is that you go out and people are not predisposed to share, but to stay in their circle with whom they went out. Before this perhaps happened, I don't know, in your youth, maybe in mine, that one went out with their friends, but was predisposed to exchange. You went out to meet people, to talk, to chat. The idea of wow is that, hey, we anticipate the hypothesis that if it's not produced in an environment of minimal trust, where people are predisposed to that, that won't happen per se. If I don't go out to wow today, let's put it this way, it's not so easy to feel that climate of trust when I go to block or exchange. Any club, any bar. It's not that I go alone and risk running into someone to chat, and that usually happens without anything to help me with that. That's the hypothesis. And I think there is some truth to it. It depends on each person's personality, of course it happens always and everywhere, right? Deeply against any type of universalization and generalization in that sense. But, I do believe that knowing that you're going to a place where people are there with the intention of sharing creates a level of psychological security that's different from how I go and how they come to intervene. At least we try to make the proposal to intervene in this mistrust of the other, because our apartment, that's why I say, we don't just start from the idea of couples, solitude. It's that the apartment where people come to this space come to meet, to know that people are available for that. But I mean, how did the possibility of discovering it get lost, right? In these places where one can meet without that framework of, well, chatting, communicating, something as simple as that. You were telling me about
this experience of these, meetings and locations, and I also associated it with the fact that going to play soccer in a square, in a park, got lost. If we're not going to play soccer on the 5A-side soccer field, we don't do it. And I associated it a bit with that, like we need, something to organize us. We're not going to do physical activity if we don't have a teacher, also like, we depend more on there being some kind of mediator to specify a device that intervenes, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that my education led me to think this way, in the sense of saying we have to intervene in something that used to happen without happening. What are you saying? I think about adolescence and youth, right? Not the little party in the square, or going out to the square to wander around. I have a teenage daughter and I say, don't wander around. No, regardless of security issues, which of course are an issue, before, we had more appropriate public spaces and they were spaces where nice things happened. I remember going to the square to meet people when I was a teenager because you knew that if you went to the square, the one in my neighborhood, people would be there, those people who were my adolescents, my youth, right? The kids from the neighborhood, the kids who would get together to play soccer. So, going to the square was going to meet people without an appointment. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have one. Today everything is regulated by the device, right? The appointment device, the device warns you. It's neither bad nor good, it's what's happening. So, well, for those of us who seek or want or believe that it's good to continue meeting, well, we realized that we had to put it together, that it wasn't happening alone anymore and it has to do with that. That's why I say, it's not alone. And I was saying a while ago, we started thinking about appointments, then we moved on to thinking about loneliness, and today it doesn't even have to do with that anymore. It has to do with saying, what about people who want a different quality of encounter? A desire to chat, a desire to meet from a more intimate, deeper place, with valuable conversations, to dare to try a different texture of the night, the day, the lunch. What happens or used to happen in a bar. In a bar there were also people who went there to meet, to chat, but not necessarily looking for a sexual or emotional connection, but
that, I want to go out alone. I want to go out alone because my friends aren't there. It doesn't matter because it's not guaranteed that going out alone or in just one place will make it available to meet. It's not like, what am I going to do to join that little group of friends or that little group of girlfriends? Are people going to come and talk to me? I don't see it happening, honestly. Just like I don't see it happening to go out in groups of friends who cross paths.
And in this sense, the improvised, the surprise, giving way to uncertainty, to inconveniences is being lost.
Of course, you're giving in to the key. Uncertainty is generating a lot of anguish. In every way. Let's see. We were talking about the unexpected, about uncertainty, about meeting again. We shouldn't romanticize it either, right? I mean, no, it's not gratuitous. It takes a lot of energy. Supposedly, let's say, if we go to the more psychoanalytic idea of the encounter with all its meaning, inevitably meeting another, love in generic terms, right? Romantic love transforms you, moves you, makes you be someone else, right? Coming with others has to do with that subjective commotion that implies the encounter, the true encounter. You have to be available for that. No, it's not just anything. I mean, no, we shouldn't romanticize it like, oh, now we all want to meet again. I mean, for me it's a value and I bet, but I also understand that there's a lot of exhaustion and a lot of fear. So I'm not of the idea of saying that what was lost needs to be restored. I mean, if there's a lot of fear of uncertainty, well, we are going through a time of tremendous uncertainty in terms of relationships, and I think there are more searches for certainties that calm that anguish than searches for things that move me, shake me up, and make me rethink everything, because we are all in a state of rethinking. In other words, fear is not a coincidence, nor is withdrawal a coincidence. We do not have those foundations as clear as before. And the worst thing, and I have been thinking about this a lot and that is why we are writing this anti-manual as a team, is that there is a proliferation of recipes on social networks that are not creating more possibilities for rapprochement, but rather, in my reading, increasingly creating gaps in the encounter because it is.
All very bureaucratized, right? The tips, the 10 things you have to do. And what happens when you don't follow one of those steps? Frustration is absolutely less tolerated.
Yes, but there is something that for me is the cruelty of this, which is the typification of being, right? So, recipes tell you, if it does this, this, and this, it equals this. So, and that's where you came up with what you were saying. What room is there for surprise, for uncertainty, for a different reading? For the uniqueness of the human being, for listening, for questioning, and not for presuppositions. I already have a manual that tells me that if someone answered me 10 minutes late or if they looked at me like this or something else, it means this. So, I'm no longer available to see what the uniqueness or the differentness show up. I have a code for reading people to feel a little calmer, more relaxed, less anxious. That's why I say, the proliferation of recipes and tips on social media is not a coincidence. It's not deeply rooted in fear and uncertainty. And it's also very cruel because perhaps we have to navigate it a little more and tolerate that uncertainty a little more instead of buying so many recipes and tips that social media is proposing to us to suffer less, but buying something that also leaves us very alone, very lonely. And going to the experiences. Specific wow experiences. How do they organize themselves? How do people contact each other? What do they also do? How often do they see each other? We organize events every month, between 2, 4, sometimes 6, depending on the month. We have different formats. There is a format that is more linked to couples or those looking for more, romantic or sexual relationships, which is called blind dates, a great historical format, right? A 2 or a CU dates for people who are willing, and as I say, brave, because the truth is, it's no small thing that they dare to do that. And so, they are 2 out of 4 dates that we organize. As I say, we don't believe in algorithms or in men, so when they ask us how we choose people, it's only based on age and a little intuition. We know our people a little, but no. Many times they don't say, but they do psychological tests or how do you set me up with just as the encounter has nothing to do with coincidence in the sense of I like this and I like this in common, then that makes an encounter. That's a lie. How many times do we meet people who are super different and something else happens to us with our gestures, our voices, our gazes, something else? It's from another register, right? The encounter. So, we don't impose ourselves. We simply say what ages they are and get them together so that they have a meeting experience. Then we have more group formats, massive, where between 40, 50, 60 and the last time 80 people, with tables, music and dynamics that we set up to generate this exchange, we help break the ice a little. We say that nothing, we coordinate the events a little so that this happens. And there we have more group spaces and spaces where they sit at tables to share with card games, with questions that lead the dialogue towards these more valuable questions that we say. Well, of course, all adults are free to discuss whatever they want, but we take the encounter to those places with introductory questions, with questions to break the ice. We have a format that is more about questions about current relationships, and we have formats for lunch, evening and afternoon. Coffee, lunches and drinks or dinners.
You can choose from the menu.
A la carte, exactly.
And what age groups more or less attend these meetings?
All of them. Incredibly, we are organized by age, that is, organized in the sense that we segment. We have, for example, on the weekend we do more than 50, 60, 40 and we keep segmenting. At one event we did all ages, but we organized the tables by age. Many times they ask us to mix it up, but well, it is also true that these are different moments in life and, moreover, some criteria must be met. So, in general, we do that and we were very surprised that there is a lot of demand now. More than 20 that we are left with. But well, in general it is more like 30 plus 30 plus 40 plus 50 plus 60.
Okay. And then you do an introduction, a presentation, you facilitate the conversation a bit and then, how do you do it? How does it continue? Where does your intervention end, right?
For example, on blind dates we don't intervene. On blind dates we set up tables for two with the menu, with the drinks, so that they feel welcome and obviously we provide support via WhatsApp telling them that a certain table awaits them, in a certain place and so on, but that night we are not there. Yes, letters await them to break the ice in the initial conversation and in group events we would propose different dynamics, one of introduction, then we usually play games to rotate the tables so that people get moving and get to know other people too. And we have opening talks that are more of an introduction but with questions that are not the traditional ones, right? What do you do for a living? What do you do instead? What do you think about this? And the introduction is not what you do with your life, but tell me something about yourself regarding a certain anecdote. We are looking for that type and they go from more general and more standing proposals to more intimate proposals. In general, we always have a time for tables of 6 or 8 people so that people can have a more intimate moment of exchange and then we intervene again so that people get moving.
And what is left out of these meetings? They tell you what happens.
Obviously. To begin with, we always have a policy of asking everyone who comes how they felt and how it went. At the beginning we needed to do it or people tell you directly. And tell you what they want to improve, what they want to change. They ask you for things and that is beautiful, let's say, because the truth is that the key to this was that today we have like a community that builds right?
Like a collective construction.
Totally collective. What do you want? And I don't drink alcohol anymore, so let's go for coffee. The over 30 want, and a lot, like I didn't like this, I like this. Since we really value the time they take to share their experience, and the truth is that what sustains us is that we receive a lot of love about what happens to them and they tell us a lot about that. And then things that we don't control, and that's the most beautiful thing. Which is, I made a group of friends. Now we have a WhatsApp group and we all go out together and she doesn't need us anymore. I went alone because I ran out of friends and today I already have a new little group that I made. The other day I met a grown woman who is a wonderful person who is now one of my favorite people in terms of friends, couples. I met someone, we're dating and they tell us everything. Trips, people who went on trips, people who get together to eat, group birthdays, couples too, a lot, it never goes unreceived. She always tells us about blind dates, people who haven't been in a relationship, but who always write to us. What an amazing experience to sit down with someone I didn't know and talk with this quality of conversation. I haven't had that in years. I'm going to keep doing it. We always have people who come up, people who grab me and say, I'm going out with you because something different happens. And repeat if you get blind, repeat the group format. And what happens is that word of mouth, right? As someone who came, especially men, because women are much more encouraged to participate, of all ages, men find it harder to get involved. There is a greater prejudice there, but it is starting to happen that, this is very obvious. Men who come back, and that's when word of mouth starts to spread, and so there is less and less prejudice, and this whole thing about coming to have a good time is something else. How do you see it? Do you notice this difference in terms of gender? What happens to men? I would say that there is something there in general beyond attending this experience, but there is some flirting after declining, being afraid of commitment, not wanting to feel. There is a difference. Let's say, we can go back to, let's say, wow, and then in general terms, right? There is a key difference between the participation of men and women. It is huge. It is huge. I'll give you a very specific example. We buy a ticket for an event and within an hour, the women's seats are sold out. Within an hour, we have a huge waiting list, and it can take men up to 10 days to fill out the form. And it's all very artisanal. Telling them about that, for example, in W, as evidence, right? Now, what happens? Well, let's say, I don't think there's a single answer. In general terms, I think there's clearly a sociocultural transformation regarding gender roles. And this has led to, to the production of very big disagreements and to an idea about what. I really struggle with these concepts that are being attributed to men, right? Now they're all princes, now they're all hysterical, now they are, and then all women see them as that, and then he did this to me and he's a prince. He did this to me and he's hysterical. He did this to me and he's hysterical. He did this to me. Well, we should try to understand it a little more deeply and less frivolously. Obviously, there's something that's changed in terms of roles, of course, but because we've been experiencing a transformation of women for many years regarding the conquest of public space. Regarding the displacement of women from traditional roles, thanks to a profound struggle by women in that sense. So, obviously, all the transformation and advances in that sense by women have left men questioning their roles. This questioning of their roles brings a lot of uncertainty and is causing a kind of shock to relationships. No, I insist on what I was telling you at the beginning. I think we have to suspend our value judgments and assign stereotypes a little bit in order to understand a little better and give ourselves the opportunity to listen to what's happening to them. Now, on the other hand, if what you see is that women are at a point where they are encouraged to try, to experiment, to play, they are not so embarrassed. That's
what I was going to tell you, men. Women in that sense expose themselves and men are more embarrassed, they are more shy, they hide at some point.
There is an issue of shame. I think there is. Let's see. I'm going to dare to say this, we would have to see if it is so true, but I think that at least in WoW what I see is this. It's like saying to men even today, I want to meet someone and see what's up, seriously, or I want to get out of superficiality to give myself the opportunity to try something different. Do I want to go out alone and meet new people? I want to try another type of way of connecting. Quote. It's as if it makes a wound in what is the construction of traditional hegemonic masculinity. So, there is a tension between assuming what I want and then taking a step in that direction to the whole construction of what it exposes you to. What it exposes you to as a man by saying I'm going to WoW, which is a place that is known to seek other types of encounters. What questions do you have? Women don't care. Women go, they do it, they experience it, but since they experience a lot of other things, they dare to do that. How they dare to try formats of things, they go, play, try, seek to expand in the sense of experiences. We would have to see, I don't know about everything, but in egg in particular,
what questions do you have? Does it make a man say, I'm going to a place where it proposes that I meet another bonding texture to make friends, girlfriends and so on? What is it that cracks the imagination? Maybe the difference is that women are clearer about what they want in that regard and men don't know. They don't know what their desire is. Yes, let's see. We don't.
No either, we're not going to talk, let's.
See, I think women have a historical journey of rethinking ourselves even collectively more deeply out of necessity. When I say out of necessity, everything we've achieved through a lot of study, struggle, collective struggle. No, it didn't come to us through a generic assignment. Which has also led us, I always laugh because I used to say, I would put my group of friends in a conversation and my group of girlfriends in a conversation and the quality of the discussion we were having was abysmal. Friends that I loved deeply, no, I didn't say, you talk about this and we talk about this when we meet. We have an exercise that was also assigned to us about what we should do. So there is obviously a difference there. We women have the constant exercise of asking ourselves much more about some things, not all of them, of course, but there is an issue. In fact, there is also a difference in men's access to psychoanalytic therapy. How many men go to therapy? How many women go to therapy? It is deeply changing, of course, but historically too. And do you know women who do not connect with men who do not go to therapy directly? It is a condition, yes. It has become a condition of saying, and at least she should go to therapy. At least she should go to therapy. But women are also going through a huge upheaval in relationships, because if you think about it, we are also stressed in the search for. Because it is very easy to say that women know what they want and men do not, and they are all confused. And we have it clear and we also navigate through, we're talking about models that help us think, right? But we go through tensions because on the one hand, we continue looking for a male model that no longer exists in terms of, do you remember when the meme of the one who solves was very fashionable? The one who solves, in the stereotyped issue, right? He stops being the man who knows what he wants, who solves, who is economically independent. He was a more traditional man, if you will. So he's stereotyping him, right? But the one who solves and who brings me all this of that macho masculinity, but at the same time is sensitive, has undergone therapy, and has questioned some cultural patterns about hegemonic masculinity as well. That man doesn't exist, he didn't stay in the ideal. The ideal because he brings me this of the traditional man, but he brings me this new thing of a deconstruction and critical thinking about the patterns of hegemonic masculinity. And that the male hasn't been born yet, right? So, we also go through these tensions. We don't know in that sense, each one has her own patterns because this is unique, it's not the same for everyone. We go through that and it's good to know because otherwise it also seems like this stereotype of us knowing everything we want and men being little princesses who are confused by life, right? We are in a process of transformation and there is a very big disagreement, a disagreement between, it's not that some women have it all figured out, yes, I can tell you, we women have gone through processes that perhaps some men still haven't. Yes, for sure.
But women, for example, look for more secure, firmer men, who know what they want or also for a man to show his insecurity, his sensitivity and also generate tenderness. It depends on each person.
That first depends on each person, but it's also both things at the same time. And who we don't want to resolve, I can't talk about it. For all women, right? But I can speak to this from what I discuss with my circle of women, or from what one reads and studies. We want them to resolve, to know, to stand on their own 2 feet, but also to be tender, sweet, and to connect with insecurities and vulnerabilities. And who is in that historical process of having built themselves enough to navigate insecurities, uncertainty, and commotion, but at the same time be secure, strong, and determined enough not to have entered into a crisis with all that? So there it is, right?
And women come from a different process in generational terms, right? I mean, we have been conquering more and more things in terms of public space, security, economic independence, a lot of issues, of being able to know ourselves and other types of relationships with ourselves and with others. And there are things that we can no longer stand, but we also inhabit that questioning regarding what we want. So, it seems to me that it is good to be able to think about the disagreement between and not burdening women or men with the idea that the problem is someone else's. It's happening to us as a society, it's happening to us, and it's good to navigate this uncertainty and see what each person connects with and what each person processes. You say that as a society, this is happening to us like more fragmented bubbles, not recognizing our own mistakes, but rather it's easier to talk and point fingers at others and all this. Why do we see it more present now? Are we increasingly broken, or have we always been like that and now we know it? That's a good question, because it's like the question of, are we talking about something radically new, or are we talking about something old that is repeated in a different way? Obviously, there are things that are new and that have to do with, the digital revolution is a revolution. Clearly not everything that has to do with networks, artificial intelligence, that's not the same anymore. That leaves a huge impact, and that makes relationships start to acquire another texture due to the absolute penetration of the digital world. So, that's not the same. And then there are the usual human problems. I mean, love is an everlasting human problem, the disagreements and the encounters. That changed the form. But the other day someone said on our social networks, no, listen girls, ghosting has always existed. It's not new. Today it's been given another name. Quote. So, the problems of love, death and sexuality are eternal. What form are they taking? At what sociocultural historical moment? That's what we have to think about. So, perhaps it's, what is the problem with love today, for this context and for this process of transformation that exists? Because loneliness, for example, is being produced, it's not the same as feeling alone, as there being a whole system that's producing loneliness, right? And for me, it's essential to be able to think about this. Loneliness is an everlasting historical problem when someone feels alone, accompanied. That there is a system today, for example, and a whole apparatus like everything technological that is producing loneliness and that is producing certain symptoms, we have to be able to think about it. That there are a lot of things that are producing more disagreement, we have to be able to think about it. The disagreement has always existed. Now, today there are a lot of things that are also deepening.
Where do you see that? It is mediated by a screen, and I also ask you if we should return a little more to the analog. It
seems to me that the real encounter is irreplaceable. The dispute with screens, and without going into this of having to eliminate them because it is not a dispute that we have. We have it with our children. We have it with our children to stop using screens. There is something that resonates with us as if there is something there that is happening, but that also has to do with losing even the physical contact of things, right? In little children, it is happening that they can handle a cell phone like that and they lose praxis. Praxis is the term of taking scissors and cutting a piece of paper.
Right? No.
Question mark. So, it's having effects. Where is it taking us? I don't dare venture to use futurology. Now, the real encounter. What happens to me with the other person's voice, with the other person's gaze, with the other person's gestures, that can't be replaced by a chat, it can't. So, for me, yes, the encounter with the other person physically has an irreplaceable value, and that has to do with what we were talking about at the beginning. When I say that love, ultimately, if one had to venture a definition, is that which transforms me from the other person and makes me become another person, and that availability to that. That's not, it can't be replaced, that's in the encounter.
And there are codes for social networks. What about the likes? They mean something, right? That's what history showed me.
The codes that don't.
Well, you saw that I was just telling you about loneliness. Well, for me, this whole code thing is a huge source of disagreement and loneliness, because it's what I was telling you, it's what format and spreadsheet I use to read the other person. So, what a total disagreement. If someone asked me to look at this. The other day I loved it. I look at social media a lot because it makes me study and think, right? What does it mean that they watch my stories a lot? So you'll find a lot of answers on social media. What do I know what it means? For some it will mean that they're paying attention to you, and for others it will be this and nothing else. We don't know. What does that like mean? What do I know what it means? For some it will be. Now, however, it has happened, that's why it's so important to think about the effects and not so much the meaning, code about it. So many likes mean this question means this, look, right? The teen series and the whole issue of what the colored hearts mean, what does it mean? There's a whole code there. Now, the code cancels out singularity. So, if a code cancels your uniqueness and everything is decipherable, what happens to the truly human that is not coded? If someone doesn't reply to your message for so many hours and you go to see what the influencers or the love gurus explain to you about what it means, they tell you that the person who doesn't reply to your message is because they're not interested in you, because no one can be so busy not to reply to you. Well, we'll have to see what connection that person has with the phone. Of course, there are gestures that have to do with showing interest or not showing interest. We're not going to deny it, but that matrix of coding behavior that is being consumed deeply and all the time on all levels, no, not only in this.
Yes, well.
Super desubjectivizing, right? Because I mean, since he replied to me like this 3 times, he put this to me like this, the result is this, therefore I have to act like this. I've seen influencers telling women what to say to certain WhatsApp messages or how to sit down and what responses they should give if someone says one thing or another. And disinterest in that case is something strategic that you can see in what I see, yes, I mean, what I've seen, let's say, and that is obviously what is seen everywhere and that is being discussed is as if disinterest, today we talk a lot about this, right? Disinterest as a value proposition, as if showing disinterest is what will generate engagement and there is a culture of disinterest as something to generate. Now, this is not new either. In our time, it was not on social media, but there was also this thing about what it meant to conquer or what the ritual of conquest was. I don't know if you remember, but social media didn't exist, but they also told us that, how is it, but that there was no need to give in, right? Not showing commitment, not showing everything, that's always been the case. Today we change the name and discuss it differently, and it's always been for women, right? In my time and in other times, women shouldn't show desire. That desire shouldn't appear because that's what's also appealed to today.
Because a binary logic is also used, that if you're not intense, you're either intense or not.
Well, today we call it interest, not showing interest if you're not intense or not intense. Today we called it other categories. Before, perhaps it was influenced by other things, right? But today, yes, today any display of interest, a little bit of desire, a little bit of direct contact, you're categorized as intense or not intense. So now the opposite has happened, which is that no one dares to say anything about what's happening to them, more or less, so that they don't say they're intense or not intense. Now, it seems to me that this also leads us to another issue that is important to discuss, which has to do with the levels of tolerance that we are having to intensities. Because that also tells us about availability and exhaustion. That is why it also seems important to me to, highlight some issues that speak to how we are. If something seems so fast, so intense, it is because perhaps we are very fragile, right? Maybe it is like our availability is very low, we are very exhausted. It is good to be able to talk about that too, because if not, we go to the category of intense, and this is not, and we are not talking about the exhaustion that we are experiencing, and it is an exhaustion that speaks not only to relationships. We have 12,000 jobs to make ends meet. We live a life with a speed in terms of networks and consumption and so on that also exhausts us. So, that emotional exhaustion also makes us feel overwhelmed with energy with very little. That also needs to be discussed because relationships. But is that talked about? Is it communicated, or is it something that is taken for granted? I think it's not talked about enough, right? I think we are, because the issue is how we talk about what we talk about. How we're able to talk, how we're communicating, because sometimes what also happens is that we're being taught how to say the things we want to communicate, but we don't know how, and so I send you a high five on WhatsApp, but the quality of the conversation, the dialogues, of talking about things, are perhaps a bit vague, right? So don't send him. I really like following all these commandments, the bonds. No. Don't send the guy you liked a message explaining how you feel because I don't give a damn. Don't do it. So the point there is to send a message. That's not the discussion. The issue is, why can't I have a valuable conversation with the other person where I can say what's going on with me? You can tell me and we can talk about it. Let's talk. Then you can make decisions, right? But the conversations. So today, saying something that happens to me is going to be received on the other side as an intense thing. So I don't say anything, and if I do say it, I say it in a farewell way when there's nothing else to do. There's no, hey, what's up with this? No, it's like everything has become difficult in that sense, in communication, in dialogue. And it's also hard to accept difference. Let's say, there's a logic of efficiency. Today you were talking about labels, about recipes, there's also setting limits in terms of red flags. How do you see that? Oh, this is like, I think it's part of how you saw it when sometimes I have this feeling, in all transformation processes, you have a moment that forms in one way, then you go to the other end of the thing to later see if we can find a way. Today there's like a discourse on self-love and self-esteem that's super intensified, right? So, it seems like all the self-care with all these recipes that we've been talking about is generating atrocities for me because it also has very unprofessional discourses circulating. So, it's all about self-care. Everything is about being yourself, self-esteem, loneliness, taking care of yourself, and then taking care of yourself with a lot of confusing information. So, you brought up a topic that is difference. What happens to me in otherness? What happens to me with the difference of the other? With what brings me, what bothers me, what shakes me, what? Well, that is very difficult to tolerate, and that is the basis of encounter and love. Ultimately, that something moves me. We don't want things to move us, we want them to be controlled, under control. It's not to judge it. This is an almost survival need that we are having. What I'm saying is not judgmental. I'm saying that you have to be able to see it. So, we need to have a red flag list, a green flag list, a list of responses of how I should handle myself, a list of what I tolerate and what I don't tolerate, a list of my negotiables and non-negotiables, a list of questions for the first date, to know if the other person is available for what I want or what I don't want. And I ask you a question. I am a pretty grown woman now and I have my life pretty much made. Now, one can really ineffectively and forever know what one wants before meeting the other person and see what happens to me with the other person, because we are demanding that clarity from others and from ourselves. I want to date someone who knows what they want. I give it to them. I go on the first date and I already tell them what I am for, what I am not for, what I am not for, because they teach us that a lot on social media too. Now I ask you a question, does the other person never move me to see if I want to do something else? It doesn't matter that there are probably things that one doesn't feel like doing and that one already knows that one won't live with anymore. Okay, a non-negotiable. Now there's a whole field of possibilities that will happen to me depending on what the other person generates in me, provokes me, because if not, we'll forget about this. He told me that he wasn't up for something serious, but then he met someone, and 2 months later he started dating. And yes, because that's what the other person proposes to me, that's what the encounter generates in me. What moves me about meeting a person who generates different things in me and makes me think that what I thought I don't want anymore, that what was happening to me is no longer happening to me, that what was a certainty is no longer a certainty. That's what's hard for us, that the other person changes me, transforms me, moves me, and generates things in me. And all those lists that I used to feel firm, secure, and in control, the other person can suggest that I change them. Now I don't question that we need those certainties, okay? No, I do question how lightly they are sometimes treated and how much content that I find disastrous is being passed around twice, yes, but I say, hey, I think the interesting thing is to talk about why we need this so much and what is happening to us, that it has become such a deep need for us, that they tell us everything we have to do, everything we have to list, everything I have to affirm, because it speaks to our vulnerability. So, it seems to me that in this case it is good to ask ourselves questions about our vulnerability. Yes, to take care of ourselves, of course, but to return to these questions of why I feel so anxious about meeting others, my unique self, each person, what am I willing to do and what am I not willing to do, what energy do I have available and why, for what? The recipe for social media is not going to give me this, honestly not.
Because that also generates a lot of pressure, a lot of burden, and it does not go away the drama.
And a huge issue of expectations, right? So, confusion and then 5 good things and 1 bad thing comes into play. I have a red flag, a 4 green. Oh, that's a lot, isn't it? But it also makes you very reactive to the encounter. A lot of presumption about the other person, very few questions. It's like I don't listen very much to the other person. Sure, you see, I always have this thing about how I already have my matrix grids of how to see the other person with these checks. He's a princess, with these checks, it seems like I meet once and I already know who you are. Stop, you don't ask about temporality. Temporality is key. What pause do we have when we meet the other person? How much time do we give to see what's there, who they are? What's wrong with them? If I fall with a gigantic grid of things to typify and stay more or less calm, who is the person in front of me? And you know that getting to know the other person in friendships, in everything, right? It has a temporality, it has a time, it has a pause, it has another texture.
Sure, yes, but it is more reassuring for us. It gives us more peace of mind to assume because it leaves us with certainties than the other thing.
Because that timelessness implies putting something of oneself into it, right? And not that it is something imposed with presuppositions. But I wanted to ask you.
We are talking about thinking differently. How does ideology and politics play into this? Well, let's see. We have a view of